that the United States will always remain a champion of democratic principles and reforms. Like many other governments in and outside this hemisphere, we will continue to urge the Cuban government to fulfill its obligations under the UN and Inter-American Human Rights Covenants, obligations shared by the United States and every other country in the Americas. And indeed, we remain convinced the people of Cuba would be best served by a genuine democracy, where people are free to choose their leaders, express their ideas, practice their faith, where the commitment to economic and social justice is realized more fully, where institutions are answerable to those they serve, and where civil society is independent and allowed to flourish. Let me be clear. The establishment of normal diplomatic relations is not something that one government does as a favor to another. It is something that two countries do together when the citizens of both will benefit. And in this case, the reopening of our embassies is important on two levels: people to people and government to government. First, we believe it's helpful for the people of our nations to learn more about each other, to meet each other. That is why we are encouraged that travel from the United States to Cuba has already increased by 35% since January and is continuing to go up. We are encouraged that more and more U.S. companies are exploring commercial ventures here that would create opportunities for Cuba's own rising number of entrepreneurs. And we are encouraged that U.S. firms are interested in helping Cuba expand its telecommunications and internet links, and that the government here recently pledged to create dozens of new and more affordable Wi-Fi hotspots. We also want to acknowledge the special role that the Cuban-American community is playing in establishing a new relationship between our countries. And in fact, we have with us this morning representatives from that community, some of whom were born here, and others who were born in the United States. And with their strong ties of culture and family, they can contribute much to the spirit of bilateral cooperation and progress that we are seeking to create, just as they have contributed much to their communities in their adopted land. The restoration of diplomatic ties will also make it easier for our governments to engage. After all, we are neighbors, and neighbors will always have much to discuss in such areas as civil aviation, migration policy, disaster preparedness, protecting marine environment, global climate change, and other tougher and more complex issues. Having normal relations makes it easier for us to talk, and talk can deepen understanding even when we know full well we will not see eye to eye on everything. We are all aware that notwithstanding President Obama's new policy, the overall U.S. embargo on trade with Cuba remains in place and can only be lifted by congressional action, a step that we strongly favor. For now, the President has taken steps to ease restrictions on remittances, on exports and imports to help Cuban private entrepreneurs, on telecommunications, on family travel, but we want to go further. The goal of all of these changes is to help Cubans connect to the world and to improve their lives. And just as we are doing our part, we urge the Cuban government to make it less difficult for their citizens to start businesses, to engage in trade, access information online. The embargo has always been something of a two-way street. Both sides need to remove restrictions that have been holding Cubans back. And before closing, I want to sincerely thank leaders throughout the Americas who have long urged the United States and Cuba to restore normal ties. I thank the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the Vatican for supporting the start of a new chapter in relations between our countries. And I think it is not accidental that the Holy Father will come here and then to Washington, the United States at this moment. I applaud President Obama and President Castro, both for having the courage to bring us together in the face of considerable opposition. I am grateful to Assistant Secretary of State Roberta Jacobson and her team, to our counterparts in the Cuban Foreign Ministry, to our Chief of Mission, Ambassador Jeff de Laurentis, and his extraordinary staff, for all of the hard work that has led up to this day. And I just say to our wonderful embassy staff, if you think you've been busy these past months, hold on to your seatbelts. But above all, I want to pay tribute to the people of Cuba and to the Cuban American community in the United States. Jose Marti once said that everything that divides men is a sin against humanity. Clearly, the events of the past, the harsh words, the provocative and retaliatory actions, the human tragedies, all have been a source of deep division that has diminished our common humanity. There have been too many days of sacrifice and sorrow, too many decades of suspicion and fear. That is why I am heartened by the many on both sides of the straits who, whether because of family ties or a simple desire to replace anger with something more productive, have endorsed this search for a better path. We have begun to move down that path without any illusions about how difficult it may be, but we are each confident in our intentions, confident in the contacts that we have made, and pleased with the friendships that we have begun to forge. And we are certain that the time is now to reach out to one another as two peoples who are no longer enemies or rivals, but neighbors. Time to unfurl our flags, raise them up, and let the world know that we wish each other well. Estamos seguros de que este es el momento de acercarnos dos pueblos ya no enemigos ni rivales, sino vecinos. Es el momento de desplegar and hoist the flag over the United States Embassy that you lowered on that January day long ago. Today, I invite you on behalf of President Obama and the American people to fulfill that pledge by presenting the Stars and Stripes to be raised by members of our current military detachment. Larry, Jim, and Mike, this is your cue to deliver on words that would make any diplomat proud, just as they would any member of the United States Marine Corps. Promise made, promise kept. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the raising of the flag and the national anthem of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in place while the official delegation departs.
We'll take this off of
It's now 10:39. We've been watching history unfold in Havana, the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, and raising the American flag. A lot of symbolism there for this historic ceremony. The three Marines who removed the flag, were ordered to remove the flag 54 years ago, were there this morning. They had promised to go back to Havana to hoist the flag above the U.S. Embassy, and Jim Tracy, Mike East, and Larry Morris did just that, with Secretary of State John Kerry recognizing them in this historic moment. Of course, he talked about recognizing the criticism. Secretary John Kerry said, quote, "This does not mean we can or should forget the past," recognizing that as much as there is excitement today with all of the events unfolding and renewed diplomatic relations, there's also a lot of criticism with this move in Congress as well. So stay with us here on Bay News 9. We'll have more coverage of the reopening of the embassy throughout the day for you. You can also view continuing coverage online, Bay News 9.